Commissioner Nevarez joins us on the mountain.
The Mountain West Conference is always in the news, so we're back on the Big Mountain with a very special guest.
Welcome back to the Big Mountain, and we are very excited to tell you we have Commissioner Gloria Nevarez with the Mountain West Conference to talk about the conference. We talk about membership. We talk about where things are at right now with media. And of course, we talk about where they want to be heading outside of conference realignment. So without further ado, here's our discussion with Commissioner Nevarez. Well, Steve and I are privileged to welcome Commissioner of the Mountain West Conference, Gloria Nevarez, to the Big Mountain. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you give us some of your time here. I want to jump right in because I know your time is limited here. You have a lot of things going on, and certainly being on a podcast is probably not at the top of your priority here, but lots of things that I would love for us to discuss in our pod. You know, we deem this conference, the Mountain West, to be the premier Western conference in all of college athletics right now. Last spring, the Mountain West sent 6 schools to the NCAA men's basketball tournament, just phenomenal. And then here this past fall, you know, the Mountain West made history, sending the first G5 member to the expanded 12-team college football playoff. Obviously, that was Boise State getting the 3 seed there with the CFP, and having 2 teams in the top 25 rankings there at the end of the year. And then also, you know, just continuing on with the positives, a Heisman finalist on the stage in New York City, obviously Ashton Jeanty here from Boise State. We call him either the People's Heisman or the Big Mountain Heisman, because we would have loved to see that occur. But my question to you here is, you know, what has it been like as the commissioner of this conference over the past year or so, with the success that has been had here for the Mountain West? Again, one of the best conferences in the nation, creating national headlines. What has that been like for you?
You know, honestly, I've started 2 years ago, and in 2 years, it has been an amazing ride. But I think it's a hallmark of what the Mountain West is. And you know, you follow us quite closely. You know, we do more with less. We compete outside our weight class. And, you know, all credit to Boise State and UNLV during this football season. You know, they're getting it done on the field.
And they were a joy. They were a joy to watch. I mean, we did a preview for the Boise UNLV game, the regular season game, calling it the G6 game of the year. And my goodness, it turned out to be just a phenomenal game from 2 phenomenal teams. And it was great that we got to see them have a rematch in the conference finals. And we're very football focused. So, you know, everything we talk about here is going to be a little bit more of a football kind of angle. But I do want to keep it Mountain West, you know, just kind of generalized as well. With everything that transpired over the past 5 months here or so, I mean, have you really been able to sit back and enjoy these historic achievements? I mean, I just went through, you know, multiple of those. Of course, the world, I'm sure, is spinning right now for you in the conference over the past few months. But have you been able to really enjoy what's been going on there for the conference?
Well, absolutely. And I haven't been traveling as much as I prefer to do, get out on campus, go to games, just because of all the other things that are going on. But, you know, at the core of it, we're about celebrating our student athletes. And it's just so fun for the conference staff to have these big seasons because, you know, we don't hire coaches, recruit student athletes. You know, we're kind of neutral all year long. And when postseason goes our way, it's exactly what you hope for. But also, I think it really does a great job of showcasing what's so special about the league, and that you can get it done out here.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a league that I have taken a liking to for quite a while now. We actually are on the East Coast, and there's late window games for me are just ideal. I can watch most of the Mountain West football games because they're in the late window. I've been trying to tell everybody here on the East Coast that this is where the good football's at. And, you know, through our channel and things, maybe people are starting to listen to us. But, you know, you mentioned that, you know, you were hired here with the Mountain West just a little over 2 years ago here. And I want to focus a little bit on membership here, because of course, a lot has been going on with membership here recently. But about 6 months into your tenure here with the Mountain West, there was this watershed moment. We had AD Frazier on here with NIU recently, and he called it this watershed moment where USC, announced that they were going to be joining the Big Ten. And really the impact of that is continuing to today, call it a trickle down effect or whatever you want to call that. And you have mentioned, I've heard you speak many times that when you came into the conference, membership was something you talked about from really day one. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit more here. When you started your tenure with the Mountain West, were you looking at potential expansion targets at that time? Or, when you say day one, what exactly were you guys discussing there about 2 years ago?
Well, even before the job opened, San Diego State was very publicly being courted by talking to the Pac-12.
Yep.
So that was definitely out there in full transparency. So, we implemented a membership subcommittee to start taking a look at that. And, you always want to make your league stronger and better, and stronger and better can be defined differently on depending where you are at a certain period of time and what schools are out there and interested and available. So it's been a constantly changing analysis over the past 2 years, but certainly very thankful that we had that group engaged. We had all the research. We had already kind of scrubbed the environment. And so when we went through this most recent membership change, we kind of jumped right in and knew what we were looking for, knew what schools had to offer, and were able to move rather quickly.
Yeah, and I'm sure at the time you didn't realize that obviously that was going to occur the way it did. And I do want to get into that maybe a little bit more from the new member side of things. Did you have a timeline, again, looking back 2 years ago? Was there any sort of timeline you had to that, whether it was for backfilling or expansion or whatever that was? Or like you said, was it really just kind of planning, getting your ducks in a row, so that if an opportunity or changes presented themselves, you would be ready for that?
So at the time, we felt we were at a pretty good number, but the landscape around us was changing so much. We were also waiting to see what happened with the Pac-12. And so when it crumbled, there was a thought, is there opportunity? What could happen there? And so, like I said, what we thought was available and best for us changed pretty quickly over the course of time.
Yeah, and as I said, now obviously sitting where we are today, that planning was needed maybe a little sooner, or even larger in terms of members than what you had originally thought there a few years ago. And under your leadership, I mean, we believe, and I'll speak for both of us right now, that you and your conference has just done an amazing job here of adding members, backfilling, if you want to call it that, here over the last few months. Of course, that started with UTEP and El Paso, a bit of an underserved market, one of the larger media markets in the nation. We were able to have AD Center on and have a great conversation about where he would like to see the Miners be at here in the not too distant future. And of course, everybody knows about the Sun Bowl down there in UTEP, just a phenomenal stadium that they have. And then you also were able to add GCU, again, a really strong Olympic sport member. We heard that from Jamie Boggs. She again was able to join us. She was singing your praises and how all of this kind of evolved over, a few months. Everybody knows where they, I think, have been here recently. And again, another strong member, UC Davis here, one of the top California system universities, nationally renowned academically. And then, of course, NIU just occurring here this past month with football. And we believe that's a home run. I mean, complete home run for the football side of things. It's a win-win for both the conference and the university. We heard that from AD Frazier, the kind of the model that they're going to be using, and the partnership with the Mountain West and how well that seemed to work for them. So with those additions, did your original criteria change? Back when you kind of did that 2 years ago, you were looking at certain things. Did any of that change since you were kind of had a shorter amount of time to backfill losses than maybe what you were thinking about?
And frankly, the core tenets of what we were looking for didn't change. We were looking for folks that looked a lot like us, that are built like us in the region. That was important, because, we are an airplane league. Unlike a
Yeah,
lot of leagues out there, we do that pretty regularly. So the travel and thinking about how to maximize what we do in our league was important. And frankly, the schools, and you just rattled off some of the great things about the four that are joining us, but what they've done since the announcement, the momentum that they've created on campus, the investment that they've been able to um, capitalize on due to the excitement has been really, really fun to watch, and just makes everyone in our league excited about the new look Mountain West.
for sure. I want to get to that maybe a little more here. The excitement from the conference side of things. I think we see the excitement from the universities. Individual universities are excited to move to the Mountain West. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how the Mountain West is excited. But before we do that, I was remiss. I didn't mention the University of Hawaii. They're now a full member. I don't want. I know we have Rainbow fans. They would say, "JY, what are you doing?" So yes, University of Hawaii in as a full member as well. With the additional markets here that you have, so something we have talked about. We've been following realignment for a while. We like to talk about football the most, but of course, realignment is a true ongoing issue here right now. But when you look at the markets, El Paso, huge media market, Phoenix, that's getting you into Arizona, which is, I think, massive for the Mountain West, Sacramento in California, Chicago, and even Honolulu as a full partner now. Um, it also, with NIU, you're adding the central time zone, which time zones are something that we have really focused on and talked about. We think that's very additive for the conference. It appears, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it would appear that media partners were involved in looking at, who would be solid ads, maybe prioritizing the ads. What, if any, role did the media partners, your existing long-term partners, play in targeting these additions?
Well, we're always in constant communication with our media partners. Fox and CBS have been fantastic through this whole process. And, we work very closely with our consultants at Endeavor, Karen Brodkin and Hillary Mandel. And so they were the ones that really brought the metrics and really brought the, what each school brings. And of course, that's an important factor, but it is just one. And,
Yes.
like recruiting, all those same markets and what it brings being into Texas and Phoenix for all the sports, expanding our recruiting base is really important too. And, we are coming up at the end of our media contracts in 26. And so we'll be actively in the market here soon. And everything you just said plays into it. It's not just one thing, but it's a collection of factors.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would like to go down the maybe more member route here in a little bit, and maybe see what maybe lies ahead for the Mountain West. But before we go there, I just got to get back to that kind of the excitement level of the conference as a whole. Again, it's clear that the schools themselves are extremely excited. I saw the videos when you went down to GCU and the Havocs gave you a proper hello. And obviously you made a trip to UTEP here recently as well. And can you speak, we've heard from the ADs how excited they are, their universities, their fan bases are to be joining the Mountain West. Can you maybe speak from the conference side of things, your members? You talked about that a little bit, but the renewed energy, the renewed excitement, passion that these schools have to join the ascent for your conference. Can you just speak to that?
Yeah, and we talk about the Mountain West has been through iterations like this. I mean, we were the conference of BYU, Utah, TCU, and so there is kind of an excitement like who's next? Who's coming up next and going to really perform? And what they really, our board, our athletic directors, our membership, the schools coming in are committed. Like they don't want to just come in and be able to put the patch on their uniform. They want to come in and compete, and they're doing those things to help them into the runway so that they can be competitive when they finally start playing with the Mountain West. And I think that really is part of the excitement. Fans know that you're going to get some historical rivalries back. You're going to be traveling in a footprint that, has a lot of great places to go and to see. And I've already heard folks really excited about our tournament in Las Vegas for basketball. So it's just, I think, a lot means different things for different schools, but definitely we can feel that collective excitement in the DNA.
That's great. You mentioned a runway there for the new members. Was there any pieces to these negotiations and becoming a member in terms of facilities or anything like that? Or it's kind of like it's on the universities and they can build the excitement based on what's going on, but to each their own because they're all in different fiscal environments right now.
I can't really speak to specifics, but I would say it's a little of both.
Okay. Okay. It probably helps that it's a little of both.
Yeah.
So again, I'd like to talk about maybe additional members. So after the NIU press conference, you had mentioned that, you're going to be taking a pause, or the Mountain West is going to be taking a pause here, kind of seeing what happens in the environment here. You've done what you have to do in terms of having enough football members for FBS, and I don't want to say that that's not a negative. It's just you've gone out, you've done what you needed to do, and we're kind of on a pause now. One area of the country, and you mentioned this a little bit ago, and Steve and I continue to kind of bang this drum. That's a saying I like to use. Is into the heart of Texas. You mentioned Texas, and yes, we know obviously UTEP is in Texas, but they're the small sliver of Texas that's actually in the Mountain Time Zone, which makes them attractive, obviously, to the Mountain West. But in terms of a lot of those other items, recruiting you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of enrollment increases happening in the state of Texas, where a lot of the country is worrying about an enrollment cliff, a lot of value there in Texas. So I have to, we've talked about this a lot. So I have to ask you, is there going to be a continuing evaluation of members, and is Texas potentially an area that's really interesting to the Mountain West?
Yeah, and like we mentioned, we've been in and around Texas through our past affiliations, but I pretty genuine, and we're taking a pause right now. I think we're going to see what our media situation is, media rights, deals, contracts, etc. And then if there's more to be had, maybe do that after we understand what our media rights are.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I have to ask you real quick on that, just to follow up regarding FCS programs, especially with UC Davis. So UC Davis has a football program. They're coming over with all of their Olympic sports, but not their football program. Can you speak to, and it doesn't have to be UC Davis, but just in general, kind of the environment of in bringing an FCS program into the conference? Is there any special things that you need to look at or you evaluate, or is the valuation really the same for any school as long as they're hitting the marks that you have prioritized?
Our valuation starts in the same place, honestly, and there are a lot of great FCS schools that could come into FBS, have recently done so, and could potentially in the future make a big impact and be competitive right away.
Yeah.
I think the thing we were struggling with, at least at this time, is all the unknowns in the House settlement, the NCAA governance, and right now, in order to move from FCS to FBS, you have to have an invite. The price tag just went up. I think you have to pay like $5 million, and it's a 2-year waiting period. And so one of the things we were concerned about is, with all these governance changes, what if we rely on bringing an FCS school up and then the rules change, or something happens that prevents or makes entry into FBS more difficult? And certainly that's been a conversation. There have been significant political headwinds within the world of FBS about what is our size? Should we be adding more schools? And so we felt strongly that right now, at this time, sticking with current FBS schools was where we wanted to be to ensure our future. Doesn't mean it's off the table forever, but certainly that's where we were this time around.
Okay.
Commissioner, I have a follow-up question for you on a similar topic. You said there's going to be a pause for now, so I'm not going to ask about specific schools like, a Tarleton State or a Sacramento State, what your thoughts on those specific schools. So instead, I want to ask you just about general strategy, from a strategic perspective. JY brought up, and I want to kind of retouch on a couple of topics that he brought up, getting into the state of Texas, adding Northern Illinois, which is a central time zone school. We talked to Bob Thompson, former Fox Sports executive, the godfather of the Big Ten Network. As a Big Ten fan, that was one of my heroes to talk to. But he mentioned about, bringing in the central time zone, having more time slots available for your media partners. So just generally, big strategy perspective. You mentioned being an airplane league. You've talked about regionality before. So from a strategy perspective, how important is regionality in keeping that, Mountain West flavor, of where you're at, the regional flavor, versus going into a state like Texas? I mean, you went into UTEP. El Paso is kind of, some people call it Southern New Mexico. You're not really in the heart of Texas yet, but you did go into the Chicagoland market, huge central time zone market. So could you just talk to us about just overall strategy of staying regional, but also maybe expanding into those markets, and how do you balance those factors?
Yeah, and staying regional was important to our board and presidents for all the reasons of, student athlete welfare, the impact on class schedules and things like that. In football, we felt we could stretch that boundary a little bit because it's once a week and it's a shorter season, and we're really good at creating schedules and thinking about travel in schedules and how to balance that effectively. So that felt very right for us. But also, it doesn't prevent us from continuing to compete nationally, having a nationally recognized brand, and really, making hay in the non-conference season and being able to play a lot, whatever our schools can get as far as great competition in the non-conference, balancing that out with a regional conference play.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've spoken a lot about membership. We'll go to another topic at this point, although I'm very interested in Mountain West membership. So I'd like to talk briefly here about the CFP. Maybe these last couple topics are going to be a much more current. Not that membership isn't, but CFP, and then I want to get into the grant of rights and this global resolution that we may be having. But CFP meetings here were held in Dallas just last week. I've heard you speak. You have a voice at that table, obviously. And while you may be outvoted like anybody could, at least you have a voice at the table and access to the CFP. I've heard a lot of the G6, as we call them, conference commissioners talk about access to the CFP and how important that is. If you had any, one or two big takeaways from last week, I guess I would just ask, do you have any major takeaways from last week? I know it was mentioned about, changes in year two, just after we finally get through year one. What were the big takeaways that you had?
And it was a special moment because we happened to be the peer conference that took advantage of that fifth spot.
Yeah.
And, it really, what that does for a league at a school is pretty important. And so being able to speak to that and the importance of access, you said it, but as long as we are playing for something, that is the most important. And, my initial position is, look, it's only been year one. We only have 1 year with a very small sample size of data. By and large, a great, very positive event. I think the media loved it, the fans loved it, the viewership was high, it was well attended, the games were competitive. Is there something to examine with regard to seating? Yeah, sure. I think maybe, 1 year of data is too small, but when you're building a new property, you've got to keep staying in tune, be flexible, amend it. So I think my takeaway is by and large positive. Good for the environment of college football. Could there be more tweaks that come? Absolutely. I wouldn't want to see wholesale changed until we live in this for a couple more years.
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up for you on that, Commissioner. This last year, you had Boise getting a spot when UNLV was in the competition. When we look at it this year, we've looked Boise and UNLV again set up very well to compete for that G5 spot. But I just want to ask you, there's been some talk of a G5, G6 playoff. And so for you as a G5 commissioner, what would be your priority? If it could only be an either or, would it be to maintain that access into a 12 team playoff, or are you open to looking at possibly a G6, a G5 playoff, even if that maybe it was an either or situation?
And it's changing every day. You have to be open to all of these conversations because, we're changing all the time. But I think one of the priorities for us is one, that CFP access. We always have to be playing into it. And so when you analyze these opportunities, you have to ask yourself, does that make it more probable or not that we get our teams in? Or is it about leveling up the best team within the entire ecosystem of peer FBS conferences? So each model's different, but that's probably the next thing that we're looking at is how does that help schools in the Mountain West be competitive? But also in the postseason, I think it's important for us to not just our CFP berth, but to play the best competition in the postseason. And how do we maximize that in any kind of proposal or postseason concept? So, they're all different, they're all changing all the time. We're open to having all the conversations, we're looking at everything. But right now, I just haven't seen one yet that's kind of risen to the top or that's really snagged a lot of interest.
Well, we appreciate all your time. I have two last questions, kind of the news of the day types of items. The grant of rights that the Mountain West is going to be having here moving forward. Obviously, that was made public. We like to do deep dives. So, of course, I read the whole document and I enjoy doing such a thing, which is kind of odd to some
Says
people.
nobody, but good for you.
um, but I mean, I think the way this was laid out was incredible. From the original MOU that was had with the 7 members to solidify the conference. But the main thing that I want to ask you about is kind of the distribution of revenues, and I'm not going to get into what that number is. We don't know, but first of all, that it's contingent on receiving the revenues in order for them to be paid out. I think a lot of people forget that. And then the second thing, that it was done in these kind of chunks, in these increments of monies received, which makes so much sense. Again, with the being unsure maybe of the top dollar amount with future changes to members and all that kind of stuff. How did that all come about? I mean, was that something that came out of the conference? Were the members super involved in their ideas to put that together? And I know I'm sure there's a lot you can't say, and I fully appreciate that, but I just feel like the way this was put together is incredible. I thought it was really, really well done. So anything that you can give us on how that occurred?
Yeah, and I think for someone who has read it in depth like you have, I think you can, and by the nature of your question, you can feel this was a group effort. This was our board, our athletic directors contributing. It wasn't just a piece of paper we drew up with the lawyers and said, here, sign this. We're like, all right, what would it take to make this something that you're excited about staying in? And honestly, it was a collaborative effort, and the speed at which we got it done and signed is really indicative of how much our schools were bought in and wanted it to be implemented, to work, and to move forward.
Well said. I mean, it's clear that they were all bought in, different percentages and things like that. And it looks like you'll be moving to Las Vegas, or the offices are going to be moving to Las Vegas here in a little while, out of Colorado. But really making what it looks like, making UNLV kind of the hub, if you will, or just the focal point. I mean, you already do your Mountain West Championship games there for basketball, which is phenomenal. Thomas and Mack Center. I mean, we watched it last year and we're like, this is unbelievable. Yeah. So just a lot to love there about that. And you're right. It just, when you read it, it's clear that this wasn't done by, not to knock attorneys, but 2 attorneys in a room that don't know anything about the conference. This was done by the conference and members within the conference. And that's what makes it, I think, so powerful that they are all bought into that. So the last thing I just have to ask you about, and I said we weren't going to get into lawsuits, but I just have to ask you, with the news that came out last week, this global resolution, and Lord knows I'm ready to move on and start talking about football again. But because we cover the Mountain West in great detail, this is something that we provide updates on when we can. And I love the statement that came out here recently. This, again, global resolution. It looks like all of the parties are invested in doing that. Again, I'm sure there's a lot you cannot say. But again, how did all that come about? Was it driven by any one party, or is it really like, hey guys, let's just get together and figure this out so we can all move on into our futures?
Yeah. And we're transparent. Well, we brought the topic up because honestly, that's what happens in major litigation
Right.
all over the country. It is the next step.
Yep.
It's not indicative of, I mean, the nature of it is you put the litigation on hold, you explore this. It could fall off the tracks at any point. We could not agree on a mediator. We could go all the way to a finish line and not agree on final terms, but it allows you to take that exit, explore it, and then jump right back into the litigation without taking a step back if we can't come to resolution. And frankly, it's an exercise in efficiency because all of our resources, all of our time and energy on both sides, we're in this business to serve our student athletes, to put on championships, and to run college conferences. And it's a distraction of time, energy, resources. And so if we can get through it more efficiently, great. If not, which is also a possibility, we feel fine about jumping back into the system.
Yeah, and the departing members are departing. It is what it is. Let's get to a resolution as quickly as we can, so we both, the PAC and the Mountain West, can move on with our primary goals and reasons for being entities. And as you said, that is the student athletes.
Yes, great point. And Commissioner, if I could ask a quick follow-up question to give you an opportunity for a closing statement. So this is a question I asked the AD and at UTEP. So it's a crazy time right now in college football, college sports, with litigation going on, the House settlement. We just saw ACC there. They had a resolution. You guys are working on mediation. So many things going on. So as the commissioner of one of these conferences, do you wake up every morning with just a like, oh, what's going to happen next? Are you worried? Or is it more of an exciting time? Because, for us, covering the Mountain West, we see these fan bases, the UTEP fan base, the Northern Illinois fan base. They're so excited about coming to the Mountain West. We think it's an exciting time, but we don't have the responsibilities. We're not responsible for $100 million lawsuits. So how do you balance that as far as just the good Lord, what's going to come next, versus the excitement of moving forward with, new membership and everything that's going on?
Yeah, I typically describe myself as someone who is comfortable with change, although over the past, since COVID, frankly, it's pushed my outer boundary of comfort. But I really do feel once we got that grant of rights signed, and again, a testament to how quickly we turned an MOU into a fully executed grant of rights. And, moving paper through college campuses is not a super fast process. It really was a statement by our membership that they're excited about our future. And it's really helped us reframe and think about, like, hey, we got the basketball tournament coming up. We got our spring championships. We're going to be working on onboarding these new schools. And so it's just helped us turn that corner into looking forward. So to your point, certainly there were some days where I was like, whew, what's going to happen? How's this going to end up? But now I think we have a much clearer vision and excitement and ability to put our energy toward that is much better on the daily.
That's awesome. And I'm so excited for what's going to be happening here with the Mountain West. As we said, I follow it extremely closely. And I'm ready for football season. We're less than 6 months away. We're going to try to get out and get to some games here this year for sure. And Commissioner Nevarez, thank you so much for all the time you gave us.
Thank you for all the coverage and the love of the league. It's because of folks like yourself that our stories get out there. So we very much appreciate the attention.
I was going to say, well, yes, I agree with JY. Thank you for joining us. And I have to say one thing before we end, and I think maybe this is why she loves our show, is one of our slogans is "In Gloria We Trust." So thank you again for being on our show today.
that might be why my mom is a regular listener, but thank you both.
We really appreciate Commissioner Nevarez joining us here on the Big Mountain. As our dwellers know, we do everything Mountain West, Big Ten, and Pac-12, and it was really a joy to have this conversation with Commissioner Nevarez. We hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Make sure you give this one a like and you subscribe if you like our content, and we'll see you all next time on the Big Mountain.
In Gloria we trust.